first of all, no one knew what to expect. And that was kind of the first thing. So the month before the show started, there was this disbelief. And then what's it going to be like? Contacting clients that love boats, not unlike myself. I've got customers that they just don't miss a boat show. They own a boat. They have no intention on buying a boat because they're happy with theirs, but they're not missing the show.
Right.
Love to just sit there on my boat and work it for me while I go to lunch. And so these guys love, not unlike myself, love boat shows. And they couldn't come because their wives wouldn't let them back in the house for 14 days if they came. So that obviously caused some concerns. But one of the things that we noticed was, I guess, the resonance, or as I've tried to solicit feedback from various size firms, from the mom and pop to the Marine Max, everybody was very pleased with the traffic, the people that actually did show up. And that demographic appeared to be, we were very heavy-handed in the Midwestern states, which most of those customers were most likely West Coast Florida residents that were from your Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Mississippi, or Missouri, that owned homes there, maybe winter homes. They migrated to Fort Lauderdale to get to the show. So, and that Midwest industrial money is real money. Yes. And real buyers. And then the one other demographic that showed up that consistently with almost every vendor that I spoke to, they noticed the heavy presence of Puerto Rican buyers.
Really?
It's the demographic that has popped up in almost every single conversation.
Wow, that's interesting. And are they buying, what size boats are they buying? Like this, owner operator size boat, the ones that they can manage themselves? Or more crude stuff? Because the sales cycle from a boat show, one of the things in the size range when you're talking about especially crude boats, and I think the crew that know this as well as the brokers do, the sales process, the minute that they walk on the boat, that can be 30, 60, 90 days down the road. So in that arena, it's kind of important to get past the hubris of, yeah, we sold this boat. Did you really? You still got to go through the survey sea trial, or did you get an offer? Right.
There are so many different things that come into play there, and a lot of grenades that can blow things up.
Right.
So I don't know what that demographic of Puerto Rican, the Puerto Rican demographic of money that has shown up and why they're here in such a larger number than usual. There's obviously could be the socioeconomic things that are going down there. They may be moving here. I don't know. But it seemed that they were from everything from the high-end toys, like at Brownie's, getting third lungs and sea bobs, center consoles, and exploring motor yachts.
Interesting. Really cool. Because you talked to all those kinds of level of vendors you mentioned when we were talking earlier. From, the guys selling the sunglasses and T-shirts to, people selling yacht toys, to the small boat market and the large boat market. And everybody kind of had the same idea, right? Yeah,
well, the two demographics that everyone mentioned that they saw was Midwestern Americans and the Puerto Rican influence for some reason this year. So there were a few, French, probably French Canadian, but the Italian and Dutch vendors was obvious. I've never had less coffee at a Fort Lauderdale boat show than this one. But I think, Lucy, it's important to remember that when you say how was the show is not a singular show. The show means very different things to very different people that are attending it. There are vendors that, as you say, the sunglasses and the flip-flops, that's one show for them. Then you move up to maybe outboards or a little bit more high-end, four-figure toys. You can get into sailboats and the mom-pop vendor, the tenders, and each one kind of has its own segment or can determine whether or not it was a good show. And then there's the vendors that supply them, the people that build the stands, that bring in the trailers, that fix the trailers, that supply the flowers, so there are many levels to this show.
Right.
And to ask, was it a good show? That's a very complicated question, because obviously profit is the motive for anybody that's attending it or working it, and then satisfaction or a way to spend your money for the attendees to buy something, to purchase.
Yeah. Well, I guess what most people want to know when they ask that question is, are people buying boats? Because at the end of the day, that's what the show is, right? It's this transfer of this vessel that supports all that other stuff. Somebody has to buy a boat for all this. You have to do your job for all this other stuff to happen. Or was that happening?
So at the show, I would say I don't know. There are reports that MarineMax sold quite a few boats, and I know that the center console market and the outboard market is on fire. That market year over is about 114% over this time in 2019. Now, markets in general, just like the sold boat data, the volume of boats, the month of August was 25% of 2020 over 19. July and June were also similar, 20 to 30% over, but that was for 500,000 and down of boats. The million and up began creeping up at the beginning of August, and I haven't looked at September because September just ended, or October just ended, but I suspect that number of year over what 2020's September and October, let's say crude boats, I have a feeling those are going to be better than year over 19.
Interesting.
That's a feel for it. And one of the tea leaves we use is your availability to get a haul out, a surveyor, to conduct the transfer of ownership. Those are some of the processes that need to take place. And it's very difficult to get a haul out or a surveyor right now. They're booked out about 3 weeks. And that is a wonderful tea leaf to show that the buying market is very alive.
Interesting. And you mentioned earlier when we were talking that the insurance guys were noticing a lot more first-time buyers.
Yeah, that is. Scott Stamper is a great source of data. He's a numbers guy, not unlike myself. And the insurance industry, normally about 10% of their book, give or take, is a first-time boat buyer. In May, that began creeping up to a point where they were almost at 25%. Never owned a boat. And there's obviously problems when John and Jane McGillicuddy walk in and say, hey, we want to buy this 68 Princess and we're going to run it ourselves. And by the way, we've never owned a boat. What could possibly go wrong? We've got 3,000 horsepower on the back of us, 28 knots on something that weighs 100,000 pounds blasting through a liquid atmosphere. Things could go bad. But they're also thinking about this. They're preparing for what may be the next thing coming down. But so many, for example, in the insurance world, so many 4-engine center console boats have saturated Dade County right now. Policy, if you're buying a boat down there, first-time buyer, and you want to have, a 40-foot Midnight Express with quad 400s on it that does 80 knots, and that's your first boat. Good luck in insurance. But these are good, to some degree, that's a necessary thing.
Yeah. We had a question in the Q&A from Becky from MSOS. How was the Sportfish market? Did you walk over there?
Yeah, I did. And I don't know that I'm the best qualified to give you that answer for the show. But I will say, leading up to the show, using the surveyors as my tea leaf to get past the hubris of the salesman, the custom sport fish market, we've never seen anything like it. I mean, in 20 years, there has never been sales in like the Heinz Farley, the Ribos, the Merritts, these very high-end custom sport fishing market where the value of what they were selling for 2 or 3 years ago is more or is less than what they're selling for today. And if anybody out there can just let that sink in for a second, these are boats that are appreciating, and that is an anomaly in my world. That is one of those words. This boat will appreciate. hard to say that because
it never happens.
No.
That's amazing. Holy cow.
It is. Yeah.
Wow. Nile wants to ask, was there an obvious hygiene concept that the organizers applied to exhibitors and visitors? And did you personally feel safe?
Great question. I can't think of a single thing that was more of a crushing blanket on everyone's mind than that right there before we went into the show. There were masks on 90% of, 9 out of 10 people were wearing a mask. The people that weren't, there were mask police, going around saying, put your mask on. Every boat that I walked on, there was a crew member there with their little hand sanitizer. There it was mandated. So to answer the question, yes. I have an understanding of how a pathogen works. I'm an absolute staunch believer in science. It's my religion. And this was something that, as we approached it and walked through the show, oddly, that concern kind of faded away, and I was very pathogen conscious.
Yeah, Mila, same with me. I attended 4 of the 5 days, and everybody was trying to be careful. There were some folks who didn't have their masks on, and maybe they were being with their bubble of people, so they didn't feel like they needed to. It's hard to see that from a distance and to know why they chose not to wear a mask, but I would say 90%, at least especially on the first day, and then going forward.
So what I just described, you experienced the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't go on any boats. We usually don't. I was taking pictures from the dock, and the crew all had their masks on. They took them off for the pictures and they put them back on. If they asked me if I wanted them to take the mask off, I would say no. You do what you want. And so that's why in our photographs in our photo gallery online, you'll see some with masks and some without. But yeah, I felt personally safe. And I got to say, by the 3rd or 4th day, I think I would find a place to sit. And if someone came to chat with me, the mask would come off. I got lax, and maybe that's a problem. But I think all of us kind of felt less of an issue with it. I don't know.
Hey, I want to just touch on one thing that you mentioned about getting on and off of boats. Since 1992, I've been doing 3 to 4 boat shows a year. So this may have been my 60th boat show. And I have never had such easy access to walk on every, as opposed to walking up, having to, and being asked to fill something out and wait your turn, or come back in a half hour, or would you give us a minute, or come back at, maybe the last day. It was back to carnival barkers again. Like, hey, Dunbar, you got to get on this boat and see it. They were trying to drag you on. And it was great. I mean, I really felt very comfortable taking their time and getting access to a product that I normally might not have had the time to wait around the necessary amount of time to get on board.
Well, that's good. It was
fantastic.
That was terrific. Awesome. All right. Was there anything else that I didn't ask you about that you wanted to let people know? I guess maybe, should we have done it? Was it worth it? The boat show.
Okay. Again, I think that's a great question. And from the seat from which the desk from which I'm sitting, I would say yes. And this is something that I'm having a hard time saying it because, again, as a believer in science, my big fear is that Broward General in 2 weeks from now has a big, a blossom of pathogen that's infecting our town. But if, barring that doesn't happen, small as this boat show felt for us that do this show regularly, because it was about maybe 30% of the normal size of the show. And it really did feel like you turned your watch back to the 1988 boat show I remember they said the first 100-foot boat to show up at the Fort Lauderdale show in 1977, people flew from around the world to see it. You kind of got the vibe that we were back to those days. But these Midwesterners that came over from, the that had been only to the Cleveland Boat Show or to the Pittsburgh Boat Show, Lexington or Connecticut, they still felt that this show was unbelievably huge. And that is important that we put perspective on, you know, if from your hometown, wherever you were from, if somebody drove a 100-foot yacht up your river, you know, in the Ha River, your family would, you know, on Sunday drive down to see the boat. We can't forget that that's reality. This isn't. And when you drive past Bahia Mar and there's a 160-foot yacht, looks small because she's being booked by something, you know, with 500 gross ton more on each side of her. We have to put things in perspective. This still was a very, very large show when you look at the global environment.
Terrific. Oh, good.
And, oh, by the way, the other thing that I think the brokerage community did very well and maybe isn't getting enough attention, HMY was making all of its vessels at Harbor Town open. They had salesmen there, and we're having like mini shows to control. Allied on 15th Street did the same thing with their facility. Sunrise, Hargrave. I think that really worked well. Instead of a shotgun spray to drag the masses to your boat, these companies used more of a rifle. You know, they direct marketing to these prospective buyers for boats in that demographic. And I think it really worked well. I've spoke to some of those guys. They got traffic. I had customers of my own that were like, hey, I know that this boat's at this location and this location. Can you video FaceTime me down there and let's walk through the boat? Technologies that we're using. I've got a boat at 15th Street Fisheries. There were 3 or 4 brokers that were there with their camera going through the boat. One up on, you know, you do this with the owners now. We're adapting.
So you think that might carry over to next year or other shows?
It depends on the health of the nation, I think. I know that there's a drive from the people that own the show to bigger is better. Is that necessary? We proved that it's not, I think. Because this was successful in a smaller footprint, we can spread things out. I can see Robin's asking about the prediction for the future. What's your prediction when future shows will take place? I think that should be determined by health experts and market-driven decisions, and not necessarily a yacht broker. That would be my.
What about other shows that had to postpone in 2020? Do you think they're going to be busier next time? Whenever they resume?
I don't know that anything will be as busy as the Lauderdale show. What may happen is that as a species, we become a bit more accustomed to things and start accepting things as a new norm. And if events begin to trickle back into the society, small concert venues, outdoor, parks where some symphony plays, and we begin doing those type of activities, then yes, absolutely, boat shows will fall in line with that too.
All right. I didn't want to take too much of your time, and we want to let our networking guests get back to networking. But thank you very much, Jason, for sharing your thoughts and your statistics. Always interesting to talk with you.
Love numbers. Thank you.
Jason's going to be here, so look for him when we get off the stage. Thanks, everybody.